Let's go live to Anthony Albanese. He's currently at the unveiling of a portrait of Bob Katter to pay tribute to his 50 years of service in the Queensland and national parliaments.
Point out what restraints were used at that time to ensure that it could be delivered. But Bob collaborated with David, and Bob, of course, is in fact no beginner when it comes to sitting for an artist. He was painted for the Archibald Prize 10 years ago by Kristen Tennyson, who described him as a fantastic model. So perhaps there's an aspect of Bob's character that we don't know about. I do want to acknowledge Susie, who's here with us today, who approved the final portrait on behalf of Bob. And it has many things in this place, of course. It's not simple. There's a bureaucracy involved, and we all have to approve as well, sign literally a document approving what you're about to see today. But it is fantastic that you're joined by your children and grandchildren here. I acknowledge particularly Robbie, who's here, who serves in the Queensland Parliament. And one of the things about Bob is that he's able to bring people together from across the political spectrum who mightn't agree with Bob's views all of the time. Some mightn't agree with Bob's views on any of the times, but who respect the fact that he is, in that most Australian of terms, fair dinkum in how he deals with people. And so there is a sense of anticipation in this building. There's crowds gathering here, upstairs in the gallery as well, in anticipation of this. I did want to take the opportunity to make some comments about Bob's contribution here, because he entered this place in 1993, 3 years before I was here, and is the father of the house. Bob was already a standard bearer for a political dynasty and had already had an 18-year career in Queensland state politics. Surely a crucible that is character building as well. With his first speech to this Parliament, Bob really planted his flag. Rising to his feet in the House of Representatives, he honoured his mother and father, quoted Alfred the Great, name-checked Lincoln and Marx, praised solar power, and continued his eternal quest to keep alive the name of Red Ted Theodore, his inspiration. Looking back on it, more than 3 decades later, what you sense most in that speech are the sentiments of a man of conviction and a man of humanity, a man of compassion and empathy for those doing it tough and working hard to put food on the table for their families. What became clear as Bob spoke was that the huge electorate of Kennedy had elected a member with an ambition and compassion and vision every bit as big as that country is. Partway through, he gave this warning to the House, and I quote, "I have not finished yet." After half a century of service of his community, his state and his nation, Bob still hasn't finished, and he's not showing any signs of doing so soon. Over 50 years, Bob has become one of Australia's most recognisable figures. There's no mistaking that face or that voice. He will flick the switch to fancy dress when the need arises. We've seen him dressed as a pig. We've seen him dressed as the Grim Reaper, just as 2 examples. So if I can make a request to Bob, no more dress-ups. No more dress-ups. He generally, though, sticks to a sartorial style that he's made his own. The hats, the aviators, the scarves, and of course the 3-piece suits. The waistcoats are at least partly inspired by Bob's belief that James Garner looked good in one in Maverick. Truly an apt choice. Along with his wonderful wife, Susie, Bob has always made me feel hugely welcome whenever I have travelled with him in his vast electorate. And I actually looked up, Bob, over the years how many times I've been to your electorate, and we got to 20 and stopped counting, because Bob, the legacy of things that he has campaigned for, whether it's inland highways, the community centre, arts precinct there in Curry, the work in Mount Isa. When you go to Bob's electorate, he hosts you well, he's a gracious host, he's a passionate advocate for the people that he represents, and he is tireless. And I do want to acknowledge as well the staff who look after him. I see some of them here, present and past. Fair to say that the loyalty that Bob inspires in his staff is something that goes to his character as well, because I've seen it firsthand. I've also seen how difficult it is to work for a bloke who is never, ever on time, and who I once travelled to Mount Isa as a minister to open a regional forum there, and rang him half an hour after start time to be told, oh, I've got a meeting somewhere else, but I'll be there. But he always was. But his staff, I think it says something about people in this place. If you look through how long have their staff worked for them, that says something about the nature of who they are. And Bob's staff have always been so loyal to him. He's a very generous bloke as well, and does things that I'm aware of that are not public as well, in terms of his generous support for causes and for people, most importantly as well. Someone who really reaches out and cares. I've always appreciated his wisdom as well. He'll come up with 4 or 5 ideas, some of which will be completely off the reservation, but in amongst them there'll be a gem. There'll be a gem, like the idea of having the power grid connected from Isa to the coast to drive renewable energy, being connected up to the grid there, is something that he's campaigned for so strongly. So it's always worth listening to Bob. He is a true original, and I'm pleased with this wonderful portrait. There will be a corner of this Parliament House that is forever Bob Katter.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. I now invite the Honourable Bob Katter to reflect on this occasion.
I can't help but reflect upon Anthony. I've always been good friends with him. I think we saw the world much the same way. And he holds the record, actually. He called me an effer. I can't use the word, 13 times in one telephone call. We had rolled him on crewing of shipping. The other thing that leaps to my mind, Anthony's visited Hughenden a number of times, and the first time he visited Hughenden, he was at home in the pub, said go to everybody, and sat on a stool at the bar there, and the biggest knuckle man in inland Queensland, it happened to be his stool, and he came over and growled at Anthony, "That's my stool." Anthony said, "Hey mate, yeah, right, can I buy you a beer?" Having said that, one of the very few times in my life that I'm actually going to, see if I can find my glasses. Thank you. Read from a speech, and they're acknowledging the tribe down here. We Cockatoons were moving south. We were moving south. We didn't quite make it to here. We had to deal with those white fellas that came in. Leave that aside. This is not a painting of a person. and I hope nobody sees it that way. It's recognition of people that have very strong feelings about their country, to make it a land of opportunity, to have the same wonderful opportunities that they and most of their generation enjoyed. Firstly, I'd like to thank Anthony and the government. I've been very good friends with Anthony, always liked the bloke since we first met in Parliament together. Albo, we've had words in the past, but whatever your shortcomings may be, I consider you a good friend. And we just need the money for the completion of the Great Inland Highway. Russell Lethbridge had a dream for a great inland highway connecting far north Queensland cities and towns and its giant fruit and vegetable industry to the great metropolis of Melbourne and surrounds. This inland highway cuts 1,800 kilometres off the round trip from far north Queensland food bowl to Melbourne, and backloading with temperate fruit coming back. I want to put on record my thanks to Russell Lethbridge, who dreamed up this idea, and it's been his dream, and to Anthony that has made that dream come true. I was still and am a great admirer of John Howard. I worked very hard to return him to the leadership, and I always felt my work was vindicated. But I appreciated Anthony Albanese, who, like Howard, is just an ordinary Australian. And that's the highest compliment that I can pay you, Anthony.
The veteran Bob Katter there paying tribute to his friend. They are friends and have been for a long time, the Prime Minister. So a reminder that those friendships happen across the political divide, and the portrait being unveiled today marking and paying respects to the 50 years that Bob Katter has been in the Queensland and federal parliaments. We'll go back when the portrait is actually unveiled.